Hi and welcome back, and in today's lesson we're going to think about something called a round-robin operation. Now this word or this phrase can have different meaning and different contexts, but in the context of programming drums, what we're discussing is the ability to trigger a sample or a sound, and every time you trigger that, the sample it's using is slightly different. So if I bring up an example, this is a plugin called Addictive Drums and third-party applications that would use this kind of technology. So in this case, I've got a drum kit here. And every time I hit this snare, it's triggering a slightly different sound. If I load up a beat and press play, we hear a certain amount of realism, and that's what the point of doing this kind of thing is. Again, when we hit a drum or play with a drum kit or a bongo or whatever we're doing, the sound will be very different each time we hit, for example, a snare drum. We can hit it in many different places with many different velocities. It could affect the drums around it in different ways. It could affect reflections based on where we're sitting at the time we hit it. There's huge amounts of variables in simply hitting a drum with a stick, and we somehow might want to encapsulate this into our production or our songwriting. This kind of thing is especially noticeable and useful if you're working quite minimally. So if you're in a situation where you're creating a large techno piece that has many layers of loops and programmed drums and effects, then perhaps this isn't so relevant because there's so much going on that the listener's mind isn't really able to enjoy the subtle differences. You could say that a certain property emerges from this, even though the listener isn't aware of that, but that's another conversation. One place we might really take advantage of this is in a much more stripped back situation. Anyway, I think it's an important thing to consider and certainly something we can learn about today to expand our vocabulary and techniques when working with drums. So let's get on with it. I'm going to start by bringing up a kick drum. I think I'll do something very easily accessible to all of you and choose an 808 style kick because we all should know what this sounds like, or at least have access to this kind of sound. And I'll choose this one. So I'm just going to drag this into live, and I've now got it in a simpler or a sampler. I could have, however, done this just as audio. But we'll start here. So now when I play the note C3, I will hear this drum. So I'm now going to go about creating some slightly different variations of how this drum sounds. I'm going to start with maybe a few simple effects that I can adjust along the way. I'm going to add an EQ so I can change the tone a little bit. I'm going to add a saturator, some kind of distortion, so I can change the overtones a little bit. I'm going to add an effect that's a bit more particular to Ableton Live called erosion, and all this does is add noise to a signal. If I press this now, you could achieve this in Logic or any other program with things like vocoders or noise oscillators, FM, lots of different options. And maybe to finish off, I'm going to add a reverb and be very careful with this. Maybe let's start off by tuning this reverb a bit. So I've just dialed in a very gentle, slight reflection. I'm going to essentially make different versions of this kick drum, and I'm going to do that in Ableton Live by using the resample function. In Logic, you might use bounce in place. You could do this many different ways, but our job is to play around, record the result, and then keep playing. So let's think, how would we process this? Maybe in this case, I'm going to make a slight bell here. So this part is a bit more audible. And maybe I'm going to saturate it slightly. move this depth up, add a little bit of slight bit of noise to it, and then yeah, I'll just keep the reverb as it is. Cool. I'll very quickly record that. Nice. So as you can see, I have one drum. Okay, let's go further, and you're going to watch me very quickly slightly change this. So I'll move this here. There's a slight donk. I'll move some of this around. That's a little bit intense. And maybe I'll slightly change the reverb settings. Cool. And again, I'm going to do this a total of maybe 6 times. So maybe I'll just work and not talk, and you can fast forward if you like. So now I'm going to do exactly the same to a snare. I'm going to call these kicks. And an easy way to do this is to just drop a snare into the same chain. So I'm going to move my kicks over here. And now I'm going to record some snares. So now I have created 6 different kicks and 6 different snares. I'm going to then put these into a drum sampler. Again, I'm in Ableton Live, so this is how we might do this here. But in Logic, for example, we could use the sampler, or we could use a drum synth. We could use Battery by Native Instruments. We could use Reaktor. So many ways we might do this. But basically, we're opening an environment where we can drop a load of sounds and then trigger them. So I'm going to drop these kicks into my first rack here of drums. And you can hear already they have a slightly different vibe to them. I'll drop my snares into here. And we have 6. So now I can just delete these so we know what's going on. Okay. And finally, actually, I'm going to see if I can't just take one of each so we can maybe hear the difference between this kind of thing. Okay. So let's make a very simple pattern. So this is a kick and snare. I'm going to drag it over here. And that's going to be the kicks. And drag it over to here. Delete the kick parts. And this is going to be the snares. Okay. So many ways to approach a round robin operation. We basically want to make sure that every time the music plays, this plays a different note. I think I will simply do this manually. In this case. But if you use live, an easier way to do that might be to use the random, set it to 6 choices that are additive, and set the chance to 100. You can do this in Logic and Cubase and others. Okay, so here's the original drum beat without any round robin operations. Let me turn this all up a bit. Sounds okay, I guess. And let's hear our round robin version. And actually, I'm gonna So we can really hear that there's a lot more detail, a lot more nuance going on in this beat. If I was to add, say, some keys, for example, and maybe a bass line. That will have to do. And play this all, we really do notice it comes alive a little. If we just hear the original again. So I hope you get the idea. This is obviously quite a simple and crude example, but we're seeing here how we might be able to build up something a lot more interesting than just using the same hit over and over again. when we make drum patterns. Try it out for yourself, and I'll see you next time.